But when you measure it flat, it contradicts that. I'm spitting flat facts and that. And I know you don't like that. Google Maps is flat, it presents elevation profiles like that. I'm a spitting flat earth king. Sentence has a ring, doing my own thing. If earth was a big roast chicken, factually finger licking chicken. We just got the measurements missing. I'm spitting eggs and begs, begging the question lesson. I've said it before, time after time. I'm the spitting flat earth king of rhyme.
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, how dare you, then be sure to subscribe. Hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live. There's also a coffee, Patreon, crypto and thanks button in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using stock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and X. Now we are joined by Neil, Click OK, Refracted Curvature, and a whole bunch of people in the Flipside Discord server, so welcome one and all.
How are you?
I am very well. I'm going to immediately transition onto a different microphone though, because I want to try it out. I'm still so super fussed about the fact that this particular microphone that I like the best doesn't sound the best. So sonically, this isn't the most pleasing of microphone. It just has a very quiet switch. So if I'm walking around with it, listening to people talk and I want to interject into the conversation, I don't want my interjection to start with click, click, and then have me talking. So I've got this, which is one of the cheapest microphones I own, and it just happens to have a silent switch on it. So at least at the beginning of this live show, when I go back and listen to my own sound recorded, processed, and then reproduced on an audio stream that's from YouTube rather than internally on my own equipment, I can tell how much better this sounds than yesterday's use of a different mic, which was the one behind me, which is the one that Freddie Mercury used. So there we go. That was the 565. This is a 12L. Not that anybody particularly cares which microphone I use when I'm walking around and making a cup of coffee, but it's useful for me to know which one sounds better, and if I can just about tolerate this one and it's not horrendously different to my Neumann. If I can swap over. Hopefully that wasn't coming through terribly on both of them. Either way, I'll do that again later so I can get a comparison, because I think both my mics are on at exactly the same time, which is not a good idea. Anyway, other than that, things are pretty good. I've got a new panel hopefully being ordered. So the one that I ordered has got a little chunk out of it, just, I don't know, 2 mil. So I got in touch with them and said, can I have a solution for this? And they're like, we'll give you a 35 quid discount. I'm like, I'd pay someone 35 to come out and fix it. So no, I'll have another one. So they've said I can have a replacement, and I will. So I'll get that replaced, and yeah, I'm just enjoying fiddling around with different microphones to see how they sound now that the room's completely treated from front to back, top to bottom. Everywhere.
Hold on a second. I was doing something, and when you said I ordered myself a new panel, I thought you were getting rid of us.
No, not panel as in you guys, as in acoustic panel. So the backdrop to this show was a complete higgledy-piggledy mess with all, I think there was 4 different panels. It was just what makes up this corner now. So 1, 2, 3 panels. That one was over there. This one was horizontally, and that one stayed where it was, but that essentially covered the entire wall as much as I could when it was the first section that I treated of the room. Well, now that I've done all of the side walls, the entire ceiling, the back wall that you never see where the speakers are, and even the door, there was only one spot that hadn't been treated, and that was the spot behind me. So I've now got 3 really thick panels that are right behind me that are all lined up one next to the other, and it just looks a lot aesthetically better. But it also means I don't get any slap echo. So when I was listening back to the show since having the treatment in the last couple of shows, it just sounds a little bit better. There's no situation where I turn my head to the side and suddenly I get a reflection of the sound off a particular wall. Or in the case of this mic pointing directly at an empty, bare surface, the reflection off the back wall. Well, that's all gone now. The room is, I haven't actually tested the noise floor. I'd assume it's a little bit quieter. But yeah, anyway, I'll go back to my normal mic now because I'm actually sat here. I'm not walking around. I don't need to use this mic.
So you've arranged all your panels in a vertical
Yes.
way. Some of them have been expressed as being horizontal, but they're all standing up vertical, right? You don't have any on the floor, do you?
I do have a couple on the floor, actually. They're by the speakers. They're at the other end of the room. Tucked away where you can't trip over them. But yeah, for the most part, almost all of them are orientated vertically. What's your point?
What plane of reference did you use for vertical?
Well, it's perpendicular to the planar surface of the room itself, which was levelled when it was built in the 70s.
Well, that's problematic. You're going to have to get rid of that. They say that Earth's curved, and you know.
If Earth was curving, the paradox that is befallen on the fact that it isn't is the thing that we discussed in the pre-show, right? If it's curving, then you need to describe, in the first instance, a horizontal plane of reference to describe a curve deviating from it. So you need a horizontal plane of reference to describe the curve from. Now, in the case of actual measurements of Earth, the horizontal plane that they derive the curve from is surface level. Now, to me, looking back on it like we were discussing in the pre-show, that seems so stupid. I feel stupid for having not seen it because it's labelled. We spent hours and hours arguing about a distance that was measured flat in miles or kilometres with respect to a calculation that relies on a altitude measurement, which is to go and speak to your point that you're raising now, John, about my vertically orientated panels. Well, what are they vertical with respect to? Well, the plane of reference. Well, in earth curve maths, h, height, is perpendicular to surface level and measured with respect to sea level as an overall reference. That's to say you can share a baseline. And then even the thing, this is how we open the pre-show for any members that are watching and say, why are you covering this again? Well, because we're live now, right? The altitude of something in the distance is also described with respect to the shared baseline. Its altitude is with respect to sea level. And it doesn't matter if you give it in meters, feet, or stories. All of the descriptions of elevation are perpendicular to the plane of reference. There's no escaping how flat it must start when it comes to the measurements, even if it did have, in legitimate terms, curvature. And what do you know? We have hills and valleys. So you can measure curvature of the hills and valleys, but they're described with respect to sea level. That's the overall reference point, or reference plane to be more accurate, that you can describe any deviation of ground topology with respect to. So, like I say, even if you had a legitimate Earth curve as opposed to the curve of hills and valleys, you'd still have to start by referencing a horizontal plane to describe said curve deviating from it. Now, if you think of Earth curve mathematics, if you've got lost and you're yawning or whatever, or you're outraged because you're an overgrown 12-year-old anti-flat earther and you're outraged at this concept, then, you know, just go and tune into something else rather than suggesting I should have my kids taken away. Anyway, if you could think about it in layman's terms, how you're given it as a formula for the general populace to chew on. You're given 8 inches per mile squared. People go, yeah, that's right, that's the curvature. You're like, no, break that down. You've got an 8-inch deviation from a horizontal plane per the mile. So you first have to measure a distance in miles to describe a deviation at 8 inches per that horizontal plane. Well, when you give it in that formula, built within the formula is the flat earth measurement of the distance that you're going to derive the curvature at a rate that's a squared function reliant on a flat earth mile measurement. So even the base general public's perception of Earth having a curve is predicated on you understanding that you can derive it from something that must and can only be a flat Earth prerequisite linear horizontal distance measurement. Per mile, So the mile must and can only be flat then? Yes, you're deriving curve from it. So if the mile itself curves, you can't derive the 8 inches from the horizontal plane of reference measured in miles. What does that ultimately mean? The horizontal plane of reference is measured in miles. Earth's measured flat with the miles. So step 1 in deriving 8 inches per mile squared is to accept unequivocally that we can measure Earth's surface with miles that are flat. Otherwise the formula fails.
Nathan, that was communicated perfectly.
Oh, well, thank you, Neil. Tell you because all this stuff's fresh in my
Does it
mind.
make the book like that?
Yeah, I was just about to say exactly that. The only reason this is flowing out of me so consistently is because through editing a book through 9 drafts, you get to the point where you understand the difference between verbalizing something and have it being concise on a page. They're different. You know, I didn't appreciate that till I wrote. Then you go, this is fundamentally different. A sentence must be completely contextualized when it's on a page so that it can sit in isolation. The idea being, I said this the other day, I think it was on Friday, you get somebody who gets my new book and they go, I want to go straight to what he's got to say on the R value. Everything that's in that paragraph that they read when they first get to that chapter must be self-contained. Therefore, each and every time you write about any particular subject-specific matter, you've got to contextualize it with every disclaimer that's laid out. So it means that I'm suddenly primed to give disclaimer-laden information to the audience verbally. So it might take a bit longer, but it's in almost like in a written book format. So at the moment, you could probably transcribe a lot of what I say and get a free hint on what the book's going to contain. Because obviously it's going through my mind. It's fresh. We're editing it. I mean, we haven't edited it for a little while. We're just making minor corrections at the moment. But, you know, through the editing process, you learn the difference between the consistency when you verbalise something and the consistency that you must have when you write about it. And they are different.
Have you thought about the well thought out rebuttal of nuh-uh? And have you addressed it?
I just heard nuh-uh. What am I supposed to address?
That seems to be the rebuttal to measurement is nuh-uh.
Well, no, I lean into the concessions. So if somebody concedes to requiring a flat Earth measurement because it's, I don't know, easier, end quote, or conceding that you need a flat Earth measurement, but that doesn't mean it's flat, I'll lean into those sooner than I'll lean into the people who just go, nuh-uh. Now, maybe that's what you mean when someone says, yeah, we measure it flat, but that doesn't mean it's flat. Like, okay. I mean, for any psychologists out there, they're going to look back in 20 years and go, oh, I need a good example of cognitive dissonance. Oh, I remember there was ball believers who would tell you about how flat Earth got measured, but then tell you it isn't flat. Or they'd ask you how flat Earth measurements worked on a flat Earth. Things like that. You know, cognitively dissonant in terms of the presentation that is self-evidently cognitively dissonant. When you verbalise, I am now going to measure this flat. Just doesn't mean it's flat, okay? It's just easier that way.
Well, what would you call it when they say somebody like Thunderfoot says, well, you just tell yourself whatever you got to tell yourself to believe that you're inside the sphere.
Yeah, I'll just give an audience summary. So Thunderfoot was taking a depiction of measurement claimed to be from what we call fondly Dingleberry Earth. So a tangential plane. So you're measuring from a flat plane. That's the only way you'll acquire elevation angles. And that's what he's describing. So he's got a flat plane with a presupposition of a ball dangling below the plane, representing the actual surface level measurement that you are, in fact, measuring. But because they have to beg the question, even when they're measuring it flat, they say, we're on a plane, tangent plane. So we've got a single point measured to a ball that hasn't been measured, that's derived from flat Earth measurements of elevation angle to create it dangling below the plane that we are actually measuring. But that's a different story for a different day. This story results in measuring an angle and then saying, well, that angle doesn't work. It in no way represents anything heliocentric. I described this yesterday when I said that I think it was for Einstein's explanations, the plane of whatever he calls it, space-time geometry, right? That flat plane, when you describe it with orbital motion, has the sun at the centre and an orbital path that the Earth is alleged to move along, also derived from flat plane measurements and superimposition of Earth's radius value onto Venus. See yesterday's show for more details. But I described it being a bifurcation of a sphere Earth. That is to say, you've got what's called the equatorial plane with a glorified protractor of Earth wrapped around that plane. Well, if you've got the plane that can actually be referenced to the movement because it's back engineered into that plane, and you start your process by measuring a plane that's tangent to a curved surface you're not measuring, there's got to be a point where you transpose the tangent plane to become the equatorial plane. And that's what Thunderfoot had to do. And when he did it, he's like, well, you've just got to tell yourself whatever you need to tell yourself to move yourself from a plane on a sphere to a plane in a sphere. And I mean, however you get there from being measuring a flat plane that's tangent to a ball that was created with flat Earth measurements to a tangential plane within a glorified protractor, just do whatever you need to do to convince yourself that you're moving your angle that you measured off a plane inside a ball Earth at what you think is the molten iron core, hell, whatever you want to call it. But he had to describe that. I can't remember his exact words. I'd love to dig out a quote. I just can't be bothered, John. But I can't remember the exact words he said. But he just said, well, you just kind of do whatever you've got to tell yourself to get yourself inside that ball. Something to that effect.
Sounds like Thunderfoot.
That was Thunderfoot. That's what we're talking about.
Oh, okay, I stepped away for a minute. Yeah, it sounds like old Thunderfoot. John, you know what he says. You say it all the time.
Well, Nathan just said it. You tell yourself whatever you got to tell yourself to, put yourself inside that sphere.
Oh, what a coincidence. It's on screen now. So this is exactly what we're talking about. This is the tangential plane. So if you want to suggest that you've got a Cartesian flat planar surface with flat two-dimensional directionalities, in this case marked north and east, then this will be the planar surface measured for elevation angles to stars with respect to you in this diagram standing with your head pointing outwards from a ball that's presupposed and makes no logical sense to how you actually experience the world. Nevertheless, this is what you can suggest you are measuring, a tangential plane. Why is it called that? Well, it's tangent to this ball. It's pretty simple. It just doesn't function that way. When you're describing orbital motion, it doesn't work from on the globe surface. That's an extrapolation for back engineering at a later time. Well, what's it extrapolated from? Well, from this. This is the equatorial plane. Yeah? When you're describing meridians, you're just describing time or the sun's path, described adequately with this depiction, with respect to a point in the centre that you could measure the angles to the sun. Or indeed, for this angle, an angle to a star. But it's only ever going to work if the surface of Earth isn't where the measurement is depicted when it's put into a practical application. For the almanac, for example. The almanac is described from here, when you describe the positional information of a celestial sphere with an equatorial plane wrapped around it, which means that you must, as Thunderfoot found, transpose your measurement from a plane, that's a flat Earth measurement from here, inside the ball, so that the glorified protractor the sphere Earth is works with respect to a different flat Earth planar surface called the equatorial plane, derived from minimum elevation angles to Polaris, and works at a single point with the meridian at the vernal equinox. So in other words, to have the Earth sphere system work in an orbital motion, you need to describe it from the centre with a bifurcated protractor that originated the measurements that you derived, a system of latitude that would be wrapped around this ball in the ever-increasing circles as you back away from Polaris, and at vernal equinox, matching a meridian line for 1 day only. Then the time and fixed position of Polaris gives you this outer edge of what you can then draw a pretty map on and call it the globe Earth. It just doesn't function at the surface with orbital motion. It only works in hell.
Well, that's a problem then.
It's not a problem. It's very out of the box thinking to be admired. I mean, from my perspective, it's like, well, at this point, it's inconsequential to me if you want to believe that you are on the surface, like Thunderfoot. If you want to say, well, I understand that I'm measuring a planar surface for the angle, but that's tangential to the ball. What ball? The ball that I'm going to move the angle inside. You're like, well, there, of course, you've got to do that to get it to work. You're measuring a plane to get the angle, and then you're transposing the plane inside the ball so that it functionally works in a bifurcated protractor moving around the sun. Well, that out-of-the-box thinking is a heliocentric worldview derived from the church's need to explain better how the lights will move, moving from epicycles to the newfangled, what do they call them, retrograde motions. That's where, again, see yesterday, so you end up being described as the third rock from the sun in a system that's no longer geocentric and has no longer got circular orbits. It's then on an elliptical orbital path with Kepler and Huygens being used to scale distance. That's how the system works. And I say it with sincerity, works. It doesn't work perfectly, but it's their out-of-the-box thinking that to describe in a reified way, that is to say, to imagine it as our cohorts in the normie society that we find ourselves, and indeed the anti-flat earthers that oppose us describe it, then that reification does require a violation of the initial base measurement. So the base measurement being this: the surface level at the equatorial plane. That's what has been derived by measurements that would be violated. So in order to avoid bending this surface level, you can transpose it to the top of the map. It just doesn't work when you want to work backwards from a measurement that you then make on this presumed to be surface level. It does not function. Hence ending up, if I could say it, with Thunderfoot having to disclose, oh, well, you just do whatever you need to do mentally to move from here to here, because that's cool. We can do that. We can move inside hell with our measurement off a plane, because we're on a ball and that. Or whoever it was that wanted to add something.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, well, the shadow that the Earth casts on the moon is using elevation angles to describe the incident angle of light from the sun reaching the Earth to cast that shadow. So you had to measure that incident angle to make that claim. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. To move from one to the other, you need flat Earth measurements. And what are you doing with your flat Earth measurements? Moving them with respect to a plane that originates the system. Interesting. All roads lead to a flat Earth.
So basically, to assert that the Earth is casting a shadow on the moon, you require a flat plane first to make that claim.
Yes. Most, if not all, claims that ever have a reference for Earth and a measurement will lead you to a flat Earth prerequisite if you dig even a tiny amount, to the point where almost anything that uses a diagrammatical example with 3 dimensions to it can be cross-referenced to an Earth that's flat. If you don't believe me, see the most recent short video that I made with gentleman that I'm discussing this with now, John, where he suggested that me describing the polar pickup pattern of a microphone would be a flat Earth proof, and I said, no, that's isolated from Earth's surface. But it isn't. You can cross-reference everything to the planar surface that you have to put into effect if you're going to cross-reference a diagrammatical 3-dimensional example that's been extrapolated from measurements in the first instance of, in this case, a polar pattern, into the reference plane that you actually exist within. It requires you have both be flat. The description, well, 3. The description on paper, the measurement used to acquire it, and the application thereafter to your real-world experience of an item. All roads that involve measurement, that involve Cartesian systems, that are in any way referenced to your reality, will require Earth be flat. There are no exceptions.
So all roads lead to a flat Earth, but all roads started from a flat Earth. Interesting.
Yeah, building a ball requires you measure Earth flat to build it. Back calculating a surface of a sphere will involve you plonking a flat plane on it to pretend it's got something to relate to the glorified protractor, and then putting that protractor inside the ball. In John's example, he's saying when you see shadows on the moon, the description of the shadows require a flat Earth prerequisite to describe the angle with respect to. So you need a flat plane in all instances. Even when you're one step into heliocentrism, by the way of the claimant's suggestion that you've got shadows on the moon that infer heliocentrism, that too will require a planar surface to describe the angles. There aren't any exceptions. If it's even loosely connected to Earth's surface, in this case one step removed with a moon claimant, they will still need a flat Earth prerequisite surface level to describe their angle with.
Well, you can't separate yourself from Earth's reference plane, which is flat. How are you going to do that?
You can't. So what can you do? Well, you can keep that as the basis, so everything can eventually be back engineered into the flat planar surface that it was measured from to begin with. And when you've got a capability of back engineering what can only be utilized from a flat plane into the claim of spherical measurements, they're not, they're calculations. You need the opposing side, that's us, to be dumb. I was saying this in the pre-show, and Neil's suggestion is that I'll make a few enemies when I'm saying this. The controlled opposition isn't what you think when it comes to flat Earth. The controlled opposition, unfortunately, is all the people who are led to the subject. Like sheep. They're furrowed into a pen, and that pen has got lots of information scattered all around it about how you should argue about how far Earth curve should be, how far the distance to a heliocentric sun is. Most of the things that we cover in the housekeeping, we were ushered to argue about how non-ball-shaped it is. That way, both sides, our humble flat Earth side, from a conspiratorial origin, and the overgrown 12-year-old gammas and betas, with their also using flat Earth measurement prerequisites to get to their ball in the first place. As long as both sides are content to use the flat Earth measurements without saying anything about them, both sides can argue about how ball-shaped or non-ball-shaped it is, ignoring all flat Earth prerequisites that are needed by both sides. 10 years in, we've got to the point that we've gone, why are we arguing about this again? You need flat Earth, and you need flat Earth, and you need flat Earth. Everybody's using a flat Earth anyway. I don't even. Why am I even talking about this? It's not going to change how a guy goes out and surveys the ground tomorrow. They'll still survey it flat. Doesn't matter how I describe it to you, next man. We're not measuring or building anything. And if we are, you can be damn sure we'll be using a flat Earth to do it. We'll reference sea level when we get our permits. We'll describe our altitude perpendicular to a plane. And if we're going to derive dip angle measurements to infer sphericity, Al-Biruni styly, then we'll need a horizontal plane of reference with parallel eye level to do so. Everything ties us to a flat Earth, even crazy out-of-the-box notions that end up with you moving around the sun in an orbital motion on a tangential plane that you're measuring flat and transposing into hell to make it function in a bifurcated, claim-to-be globe Earth surface that you're now standing within, making it nothing more than a glorified protractor. Each and every step of that reification that violates its baseline measurement required a baseline measurement. We need a baseline measurement then. Yeah. What are we using? Well, surface level or sea level. Okay, so we've got a surface level then. Yes. Well, can it bend? No, it won't function as a horizontal plane of reference then. So we've got a plane of reference that is Earth's surface that cannot under any circumstance be bent. That's correct. Okay, what do we use that for? Building a ball. Okay. This all seems pretty silly now we look at it, doesn't it?
Well, hold on a minute. If I can use a non-inertial plane and an inertial plane to describe Coriolis and a not actual drift, why can't I apply that to
That was a nightmare. Ugh. What you've just described was the most nightmare-ridden chapter of the book. So when writing about Coriolis effect, I fucking hate Coriolis effect. Right? It's so overly complicated. Coriolis isn't that a complicated effect, right? Once you get the bare bones of it, you can understand it. I'm not going to do my explanation for it now. The convolution is that there's a Coriolis effect that truly does exist, which requires, as John's just described, an inertial reference frame and a non-inertial turning reference frame, right? Two flat planes of reference. That's where John's point ends. Now, you'd think, well, just incorporate that into the chapter that you'd already written about the convoluted nonsense and cockwaffle that is debating Coriolis. No, it's already 25 disclaimers long in each sentence before packing in the fact that you also require a flat earth prerequisite in both planes described, non-inertial and inertial, for the Coriolis effect to exist. It does, it just doesn't apply to a sphere Earth. So then you have a new description of something we termed Globiolis effect, a deviation from the original standpoint that you've got a Coriolis with two different reference frames. That's where you have people like Simon Dan stepping in, because they don't understand the complex, it's not that complex, nature of Coriolis and its requirement for two reference frames, when he tells me proactively in debate, you and your reference frames are ruined. Now, ultimately speaking, I remember at the time, people telling me Simon Dan doesn't debate. Like, doesn't debate? He's debated me. He's contacted me proactively to ruin his own bleeding reference frames. And then gone on shows and say, I don't debate flat earth. It's like, what all you're doing is trying to rip off Tyson, because that's what Tyson says. But Dan does. Dan text, or whatever it was called at the time, tweeted me proactively with a debating point he thought he could lord over me in his overgrown 12-year-old way. Look how valuable this information is. You and your reference frames are ruined. He even verbalised it on one of his own little videos. Couldn't even manage to get through the sentence without stuttering. You and your reference frames have been ruined. End quote, Simon Dan. Well, this is a deviation that I describe as an anti-flat earther. That's someone who would label me a flat earther when I accurately detail globe rhetoric and how it fails. Well, that's not me being a flat earther. I'm not identifying, as John just did, how this claim requires planes. I'm describing how it fails based on the non-inertial turning reference frame that would cause a not actual deflection, that's apparent drift, and how we don't see that on an Earth that's claimed to be turning. Enter Dan to tell me my reference frames are ruined. We've got an anti-glober, me, showing someone who's claiming they believe in a globe, how it fails, and then they claim to be globe believer, Simon Dan, actually an anti-flat earther, because he's telling the in name only flat earther how he's wrong, in defiance of his original globe claim, aka being an anti-flat earther that's more than willing to relinquish his own claim in the first instance that Earth has got two reference frames. Quote, you, meaning me, and your, meaning my, reference frames that I don't have and Globe Earth claims has got two, are ruined, says Dumbo Dan. Like, no, complicated it's not. How does Coriolis work? Roundabout. Spins. You are sat on it, spinning. You look up as two people who are not on the roundabout toss a ball in a straight line over the top of your head. As you watch the ball spinning underneath, it will appear, that's not actual deflection, appear, but not actually, look like it's curving. Why? Because you're turning underneath the ball. I don't know, like an example where Earth turns underneath a football, as Neil deGrasse Tyson asserts that Earth turning underneath footballs causes them to deflect and cause field goals. That would be Earth turning underneath an inertial frame of reference. That's a 1, 2, just for Dan, who's a Dumbo. So when Dan thinks, oh, we don't see this effect, that's because there's only one reference frame, they're ruined, he tells me. Now, that's stupid. Now, you can see with this ever-increasing, getting ever and ever longer description of Coriolis, how it fails with an example, also clarifying who the players are, me, as the anti-glober, labelled flat earther, Dan, claimed to be the globe believer, actually anti-flat earther, how he fails to understand how his claim on the globe needs two reference frames, and tells me that my description in anti-flat earth rhetoric of a globe that fails for its lack of deviation, noticeable from a surface that's supposed to be turning, is told that my, they're not, reference frames fail. Now try and incorporate into that overblown, getting ever longer description how the flat reference frames are being ignored by all as that discussion takes place. That when you start the discussion, regardless of which side you sit on the fence, you need a flat plane of reference to be rotating. Now, if you haven't got one and you're going to describe it globular, you're going to need an axis running through a flat plane of reference. So you can pretend that it has something to do with sphericity? No, it's being described with respect to a non-inertial, flat plane of reference with an axis through it. Doesn't make it ball-shaped. It means you need a flat, non-inertial turning reference frame. That's what Coriolis is. The fact that we don't have this effect means that explaining it within a chapter of the book becomes incredibly complicated when your main objective is to make this digestible for a reader from all sides. That's to say, I want all people, normies, flat earthers, globe believers, anti-flat earthers, anti-globers, to all be able to read and digest what Coriolis effect is, how it's applicable in real terms, how it fails to be demonstrated on a globe, how a globe believer turned anti-flat earther will tell me my reference frames are ruined when Earth doesn't demonstrate the effect they need, and how ultimately it's all superseded by it needing to be flat for the description in mathematics. I'm done.
Wow. And see, the whole thing is, Coriolis effect is real, just no Earth-based Coriolis. And the way you explain is very comprehensible, very easy to understand. But they convoluted it so much. I mean, just Google it. You'll see what you come up with. They talk about hurricanes and weather patterns, and that has nothing to do with Coriolis.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can make it cognitively expensive, then people won't invest the time in it. Again, something that I've woven into each of the chapters. There's a certain perception from what I call overgrown 12-year-olds, betas and gamma dicks, mostly male, who perceive this information to be valuable. If they can try and comprehend how it is claimed Earth has this effect and verbalise it to an audience, they can lord it over your average Joe who takes one look at this and goes, how will this benefit me? How will investing my time into understanding Coriolis deflection, or, in the case of our rhetoric as anti-globers, the lack of drift Earth demonstrates, how will it benefit me? And they'd be right. Their assessment's correct. I'm not criticising your average normie who looks at this and goes, who cares? It looks boring. It is boring. But there's such a vast and stark contrast between me and the person I'm relating to now looking at Coriolis effect and going, that looks boring. And another guy who goes, I'm going to have your kids off you. You deserve to be castrated. Jump off a tall building. Go and drink bleach. I'm going to have your channel off you. Watch my 300 sock accounts. Yeah? See the stark contrast between the guy on this side, overgrown 12-year-old beta and gamma dick with a bit of internet bravery, versus most average people who just look at it and go, that's really boring. This guy's invested in it. So he'll fight tooth and nail to defend his fart-sniffing, boring-ass information that benefits nobody. The effect doesn't even happen. We don't have a Coriolis effect. Nothing's drifting. But they'll defend that with the most vigour they can muster, while this guy's snoozing while he's reading about it.
Well, at first, when you first come into the topic, that's one of the main proofs they give you. Coriolis, like the water goes down the drain one way in the southern hemisphere, and it goes down the opposite way in the northern hemisphere.
Which isn't
That was
Coriolis
like
effect.
a big thing.
Coriolis effect is a not actual deflection. I was just about to stand up. Right, back to the roundabout example. If I describe a ball tossed over my head between two participants who are not sat on a merry-go-round, right? The ball is just going between these two people over the top of the roundabout, and I'm sat watching it going in a straight line, because it actually goes in a straight line. If I then start rotating, the same ball moving straight looks like it curves. Now move to water swirling down a drain. Is that an apparent deflection of the... No, it's an actual deflection. It's got sod all to do with Coriolis effect. Nothing. Literally nothing. The not actual deflection of the ball as you rotate beneath. That's Coriolis deflection. That's you seeing a not actual drift. Simple. Now, they can translate that in an accurate term into the stars. The stars aren't really moving. Your claim to turn underneath them. That's their claim. Now, in a direct translation to Coriolis deflection, that's to say not actual drift, well, the stars are not actually turning, according to their rhetoric, that the ground beneath your feet is. That's complete nonsense, because it has a knock-on effect that Earth suddenly becomes a non-inertial turning reference frame. And we'd notice. We don't, because that's the only example that can actually tie to the true, not actual deviation at 15 degrees an hour that you would suggest is caused by a Coriolis deflection. Ergo, Earth turning underneath the stars, and helicopters and drones and aeroplanes and balls that you toss that you'd see drift. Like a field goal described by Tyson. That's what is alleged to be the case. Earth turning underneath an inertial reference frame. You just don't actually see any of those effects. If Earth turns underneath a football to cause it to deflect and go through the goal, then Earth turns underneath the blimp that's filming the game. And it would just have to hover and the next continent along would come to it.
No. You're missing it, Nathan. Earth and atmosphere move as one.
That's one reference frame then. So back to, well, no, Nathan, you don't understand, you and your reference frames. No, I don't have Coriolis reference frames. Me understanding how two reference frames can apply, the one that the ball travels straight through and the one that I'm turning on, those are the two reference frames. If you say, no, the air the ball's moving through moves with the roundabout. Okay, so no drift, no 15 degrees an hour then. That's the problem. There isn't any. So when the ballers recognise the reality that there isn't any drift, they tell us that our reference frames are ruined because they're stupid. At a fundamental level, Simon Dan's stupid. He doesn't understand the most basic principle of Coriolis. He didn't even research it. He just automatically assumed that because I'd said it, it was wrong. Therefore, and in an anti-globe manner, typical to how anti-flat earthers behave, they've turned around to a flat earther, in name only, who's describing how the ball fails, because it doesn't have two reference frames, on a claim to be Earth that's turning underneath the football to cause the field goal. Okay, well, if it's turning underneath a football, it's turning underneath the aeroplane, and it's turning underneath the stars, right? No, they're all turning together, says Dan the Dumbo. You and your reference frame. I haven't got any, you stupid clown.
Yeah, that's projection. His reference frames are ruined.
How does a non-inertial plane, which is moving at a increasing rate of velocity or changing its angle in an arc path, which is still a plane of reference, and a inertial plane, which is not accelerating or changing its vector, which is still a plane, have anything to do with living on a sphere?
It doesn't. It's a flat Earth prerequisite.
Yeah, well, that gets us right back to the root of the matter. Two flat planes, huh?
Yeah, so that's where I've had to incorporate into an already complicated chapter about Coriolis effect. The fact that there is a constant need to put brackets after a complicated, already disclaimed 4 different ways example, I have to then stick a set of brackets in and go, well, the plane is a flat Earth prerequisite, end brackets, to explain to the audience, in this case reader, that what you're describing, let's not forget at any of the points during the explanation that these are flat Earth prerequisites we're talking about.
Yeah, but if you're on a show promoting your book and that comes up, you'll be able to clarify in a lot of people's minds this Coriolis nonsense. Because the way you've explained it, that's the way it is. Everything else is just convoluted nonsense, deliberate convoluted nonsense, which has nothing to do with the Coriolis effect.
Yeah. What's worse is the people who get propped up and promoted through the rigged game that we used to play, they don't even understand how Coriolis works. You know, people like Simon Dan's mind, there's only one reference frame. Oh, Earth and atmosphere travel together. Well, unbonded gas violating the first law of thermodynamics, increasing its automatically assumed to be spherical, increasing radial value, therefore giving you an increased distance in circumferential value as it raises in altitude that you'd also have to measure off a flat Earth. So these unbonded gas increase their velocity to keep in lockstep with the ground that's getting ever further in distance to travel at an increased radial value. Number one, you can only measure the increased radial value, if you assume it, as a prerequisite flat Earth measurement from surface level for altitude. If you bend the surface level that you've assumed is flat to give you an altitude to suggest that the air and atmosphere move as one, then number two, you're violating the claim that there's 2 reference frames, because now you're saying that unbonded gas violates the first law of thermodynamics and increases velocity with respect to a surface it's not bonded to. Like, you guys not only don't understand that, number one, your claim comes with 2 reference frames, you're going to tell me that you've only got 1 and give me demonstrations of things not drifting. You're like, okay, so did the stars stop, Dan? You don't understand how many reference frames your claim needs. No, he doesn't. He's stupid. They're the people who get 100,000 views because they're absolutely reliant on him being stupid. His purpose on the internet is to dumb down society. That's Dan's lot. That's what he's here for. Making everybody who watches him more stupid. That's it. That's what he's here for, isn't it?
Seems that way.
It is that way.
Right? Because you explain it very succinctly, perfectly, and he's not getting it, and a child could understand that. So it seems that he's put there for a reason.
I don't want him to get it, and my attitude's completely changed. Do you ever watch Inglourious Bastards?
It's an excellent movie.
It is. Would you prefer that someone like Dan, who's poisoned society, just blends into the background when people start to realise how nonsense-ridden the heliocentric model is? It'd be like the Nazis who get home and take off their uniform. Suddenly you don't know they're a Nazi anymore. I say let's carve a swastika into his head, they say in the film, so we'll know exactly who you are. These scumbags, these people who go around suggesting that their fellow man doesn't know what they're talking about while they decry their own claim in the first instance that they didn't understand. Those people need identifying for being stupid.
Globes in their heads.
But they'll be the first to run and cower and fade into obscurity the minute they're demonstrated to be wrong. That's what they'll do. At the moment,
Not if we can carve globes in their heads.
maybe. But, you know, being held accountable is what these people should be. Given that they've bullshitted people with their lack of understanding and comprehension of their own bloody claim in the first instance, in this case 2 reference frames, they should be held to task for it. Like, you were wrong. Yet you got promoted to the wazoo with your wrong information. All you served was to dumb down society. That was your place here. Now, that's people like that end up like Phil Bell, questioning whether or not their validity of existence was worth it or not when they're on their deathbed. That's what Dan will be.
Oh, hold on. I got good news. Phil has supposedly defeated it, so that's great news. Nobody wants to see anybody else die. So if he's overcome it, that's good for you, Phil.
I don't care. Stop contacting us. Nobody wants to hear about Phil Bell. Nobody wants any lessons from him. Nobody wants any education from him. We're good, thanks. Everybody dies
Well,
eventually.
if we're gonna be labeled as heartless bastards, when it didn't matter how you were told to drink bleach and jump off a building when you were in your 30s, it just suggests that, you know what, old people just go die already is bad. So now we gotta, at least come back and say, hey, that's good news that he overcame cancer.
Not really. I don't care either way. If he dies, he dies. If he doesn't die, he doesn't die. Why am I even concerned myself? He doesn't live in my country. He's not somebody I'd want to befriend. I couldn't care less if he lives or dies. Like, my indifference is the same. I don't care. Right? What I do care about is whether or not he's in touch with us, suggesting that he needs to impart his education we haven't asked for upon us. At which point, get lost. In which case, get lost and die. Like I've been told, as you just pointed out, for the last 10 years. No, I don't care. We don't care if you die or not, in this case. Oh, you're not going to die. I have exactly the same feelings. I couldn't care less. What I do care about is whether or not these people feel that they've got to proactively contact me. Like Dan, proactively contacting me via Twitter. I mean, he has to lie. I don't debate flat earthers. Really? What's this tweet, then, that you proactively sent? Not a debating point about how reference frames are ruined? Nah, that's a liar for you. You got to lie to believe you're on a sphere. And in this case, to defend the fact that there is no noticeable Coriolis drift on Earth, you'll lie about how many reference frames you are in comprehension of. Not the subject himself. He's not lying about that. He's too stupid to understand how reference frames work. When it comes to him contemplating his worth, when Dan's on his deathbed, these are the things he'll contemplate. Won't they be? Just like when it was the case that some man who he had no desire to be in communication with is on his deathbed. Doesn't matter who the example is. when it comes to your contemplation for whether or not you've served a good life, because that's all you've got, the money won't go with you, it can't be buried with your Mercedes, right? That's all you'll get to contemplate. Did I do well here when you're croaking? That's what you get to contemplate. Now me, I won't be thinking, I think I need to get in touch with Dan and make him understand how reference frames work. I will not care.
You think that? So you're taking the Ivan Drago approach. If he dies, he dies.
Everybody dies. It's not if.
And you don't care that Rocky's holding Apollo in his arms with tears in his eyes.
Rocky? Apollo?
Yeah, remember Drago? If he dies, he dies.
It's Darth Lundgren, right?
Yeah, and poor Rocky's holding, Apollo in his arms with tears in his eyes, and he glances up at this giant of a man he's going to have to face.
I'm pretty sure Darth Lundgren's also an astrophysicist, like Brian May and
Yeah, he is.
Cox.
Well, he was until, who was that black singer?
Michael Jackson.
No, the female that he was dating.
Michael Jackson.
No, she was in the Conan the Barbarian movies. Something Grace.
Grace
Anyway,
Jones.
she got him out of it.
Grace Jones.
Yeah, she got him out of the, I guess, science world. Is that astrophysicist? Is that a scientist?
No.
A pseudoscientist, but yeah.
Give it 10 or 15 years and it'll just be one of those degrees that people laugh at, like, say, you went to art college.
What is an astrophysicist anyway?
Well, it's an oxymoron. Astronomy is the naming of stars. Astro. Names. Astro naming. Astronomy. Physicist means somebody who studies the physical and natural world. Naming things isn't studying with science and the scientific method the cause of a naturally occurring phenomenon. That's physics. So physics is the study of the physical natural world, exclusively dealing with cause and effect. Astronomy is exclusively dealing with naming things, giving things names, pointing at lights and saying, that's what I'm going to call it.
Yeah, so they'll never be able to go past the observation so far.
They've got plenty of step one, right? They've got plenty of phenomena.
Yeah, but will they ever be able to, take it to the next step? Right now, it's not, so it's not science. It's pseudoscience.
Yeah. That's what it is. It's pseudoscience because it's not following the scientific method. Regardless of what discipline you claim to be within the scientific fraternity, as long as you've adhered to the scientific method, you can say you've done science. Science being an empirical method to offer an outcome with a contradiction in terms built within the queen of experimentation. That's hypothesis. The suppositional causal influence of being married to a contrasting prediction that can't simultaneously exist at the same time. That's to say, if my independent variable is true, that's to say I vary my independent variable and it does cause the effect I observed at step one of this method, then it automatically rules out the other option in the hypothesis. Your marriage between the contradiction in terms of if A then B, that's an affirmation that A does cause B, automatically cancels out if A not B, if you vary A and it does cause B. You can't have A cause B and simultaneously, that's at the same time, A not cause B. You can't have it both cause and not cause something. So to be a physicist of any description, then you would establish the cause of an effect observed within the physical, that's physics, natural world, that's natural phenomena, by varying and manipulating what you assume causes the effect. Astrophysics isn't about that, is it? So it just becomes an oxymoronic hiding of the fact that this is a pseudoscience category, hijacking the validity that is offered by true science by following the scientific method. You can hide astronomy as being proven when it's just a series of just so stories by putting it in the camp of science, by labeling it physics. So then you end up with pseudoscience stories and naming things physics. That's its true broadened title. No.
Interesting.
Could you give me a phenomenon that does not require a planar reference to describe?
No. I'm just going to go with no.
Well, like a leaf falling from a tree.
Still needs a planar reference.
Planar reference.
Yeah. An explosion. An explosion.
An
A geyser.
explosion. Hold on. An explosion.
Yeah, like a volcanic eruption or something similar.
Right, but that's not astral. You're talking about astrophysics, right? So give me an astrophysics phenomenon.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Well, everything to do with the stars is always starting with your description of them in the sky with respect to the plane we're standing on.
Stardust, black holes.
No, I got
Nebula.
one. I got one. A freaking what do you call those things when the sun is blocked by the moon eclipse?
Right. The angle of the sun is blocked by the angle to the moon.
Yeah. I guess you can't. If anybody else could think of one.
It won't be. If it involves anything to do with a variation, that's a measurement, and it's in reference to Earth in any capacity, it will and can only be a flat Earth prerequisite. I've said this on many shows. I say it throughout the whole book. There are no exceptions. I said it at the 1/3 point of this show as well. There's no exceptions. If it's referencing Earth and its surface, the measurement will and can only be flat. If the measurement's already been done, then Earth was flat to acquire that measurement. If the measurement is to be done in future tense, then Earth will be measured flat in all circumstances and without exception. Like I say, this isn't to be downplayed. When I say the entire debate is rendered moot by this fact. What fact? The fact that there are no circumstances where Earth can be or has been measured anything other than flat.
The main housekeeping question. Excellent. What about a shooting star, John? That's an astral phenomena, right? That's coming from the sky.
As it traces a path across the sky. How are you going to describe that path?
It's a trajectory, isn't it?
Yep.
Trajectory is a flat Earth prerequisite. Like us talking about Artemis yesterday, as soon as you start studying the Cartesian systems that are deriving the trajectory or the path of the rocket, in this case star in your example, you will and can only measure Earth flat as a Cartesian grid if you're going to describe it with respect to plotted out points on the ground. That's the mapped territory. For the trajectory to be detailed, Earth will and can only be flat. Same applies to a shooting star.
Wait a second now. The rocket launches at a certain position on the Earth. That Artemis got shot up from one position on the Earth. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be flat, does it?
Yes.
It got shot up.
Yeah, Yeah, from that certain point, let's assume that the Earth is a globe. And at that point, the rocket gets shot up from that particular
Nope, not
section of Earth ball.
Then it's not up.
Not up.
Out.
All right, it got shot away.
No. See, to describe it being shot away means you need to first derive the concept that you're begging the question of, right? So when we used to say, well, you won't get to beg the question here, like you've just done, Neil, right? Well, now I say, well, beg away. Where'd you get the presuppositional sphere from? Well, you need to derive the sphere from radial measurements. Where'd you get the radial measurement from? Elevation angles to the Sun and Polaris to derive a system that can be converted from its areas of equal altitude to a square grid, two-dimensional, Cartesian, flat Earth grid. That's a conversion. So I've already mentioned it. Where'd you get the ability to convert it into a grid that can later be wrapped around a cylinder to have it projected onto a ball? Well, those prerequisites start with the flat Earth measurement to derive the radial value, outside edge of a sphere, to give you a circumference. That radial value is derived from the vernal equinox and areas of equal altitude. That's Polaris measurement for the latitude system. So to derive the sphere, for you to say, let's just start on a sphere. Well, where'd you get the sphere from? Okay, I'll start there. Let's just find out why we've got a sphere and what the sphere is, though. What's your sphere? Well, it's a sphere in a sky vacuum at radius 3959 miles. Okay, where's that value come from? Well, from measuring angles off a flat plane, of course. So you can't violate the base principle measurement of the surface level that creates the sphere to ask that you can beg the question of sphericity that is dependent on, that's to say it's foundationally reliant on, having flat Earth measurements in the first place. This is just another example. We're describing Earth, and if you're going to suggest its sphericity, you must have measurements. Well, then you're just going to go straight onto a road that leads you to a flat plane that you measured to get the sphericity that you're inferring we should start with.
No, pi equals 2.
I don't even know what that means. That's just nonsense. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, the
According to
direction,
your circumference,
altitude.
according to your circumference, pi equals 2.
On my circumference.
You just used it.
I'm not using anything. You asked me if we could start on a ball. If you want to start on your ball, there is only one ball you can start on, and that ball, this is at what point becoming mine. It isn't. I'm describing heliocentric sphericity in its derivation of R-value angle measurements from surface level. Those are facts. When you say, well, you're saying your ball... No. This isn't mine. Maybe you are confused. Maybe you need to speak to some heliocentric priests about their derivation of their R-value that created their sphere that Neil, by devil's advocate, is pretending he believes in to ask me questions about how spherical we can start this argument with. When I point out, no, we'll need to know how big your sphere you want me to beg the question of is. Doesn't mean I'm going to beg the question. It doesn't mean it's my sphere because I understand the radial derivation measurements. It means your sphere derives its value from a radius measurement that needs Earth to be measured flat to acquire it. What's that? That means pi equals 2. Sounds like you need locking up. Sounds like you're mental if that's your position based on the heliocentric derivation of its R value. I mean, you can say pi equals 2. You can try and ascribe it to me, but I'm not measuring radial values of anything. Ever. Anything else? Clearly not. With that, I'll say if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, though, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So another massive thank you to all of you who liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, hit me up on PayPal, joined as a Patreon, all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
But when you measure it flat, it contradicts that. I'm spitting flat facts and that. And I know you don't like that. Google Maps is flat, it presents elevation profiles like that. I'm a spitting flat earth king. Sentence has a ring, doing my own thing. If Earth was a big roast chicken, factually finger licking chicken, we just got the measurements missing. I'm spitting eggs and begs, begging the question lesson. I've said it before, time after time. I'm the spitting flat Earth king of rhyme.